Good day, paranormal community, and thank you for partaking in this amazing episode of the Odyssey Files. I'm your host, Michael O'Neill. With me is my wonderful co-host, Mr. David Sawyer. Good afternoon, Dave.
Good afternoon, Mike. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a little different today.
Why?
A little different start time.
Yeah, but you know what? That's like becoming a normal thing. Like we just start whenever.
Yeah, we just kind of go whenever.
Yeah.
And if we're on in the morning, we always say good evening and, vice versa.
That's why from now on, it's going to be a good day.
Good day. Yeah.
I pretty soon this show is going to go full European. So,
okay.
Or either that or Australian, because the Australians are like, good eye, mate.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we're going European, I got to get myself like a bowler hat that I can wear or something like that.
No, please, God, no. Although now you just gave me a great idea for your birthday or Christmas.
Oh, thank you.
It's either going to be a bolo hat, like you just said, or I'm going to get you a fedora to represent the Hat Man.
There you go. I'll take a fedora.
Take a fedora?
Yeah, I like fedoras, actually.
I wouldn't know. I've never worn one, so
I had one a long time ago. But anywho, nothing exciting to report this week, like experiences wise. It was kind of calm, just busy at work. It's just Jesus. That drive going back down to the office again just sucks.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So busy week at work, good week, but busy week. And yesterday I was chilling, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna lay down, take a nap. About 3:30. Seems like it happens like it's a curse on the weekends. I woke up at 11:30, slept right through my alarm. Well, there's the 2 hours turned into 8 hours. That's a hell of a nap on a Saturday afternoon. So then I was up all night.
Yep.
And then I went back to bed at 6 a.m. I got up at 10:30. So it's been
nice.
Kind of a weird weekend.
I actually, I was thinking I was going to message you, and I'm like, yeah, nah, he's in bed. He ain't going to get it anyway. And this was like 3 a.m. So now that I'm overnights, I was telling our wonderful guests, which we're going to get to in a moment, that I didn't get to bed until after 6:30. So you and I are in the same boat.
Yeah.
But I didn't get the 8-hour nap.
No, you didn't get the 8-hour nap. No, you were busy. So
I was doing my thing. So anyway, enough chit chat.
Enough chit chat. Let's get to the meat of the show.
Yeah, the show. Yeah, the show's not about you, Dave. So let's just.
Well, half of it is.
Not today.
Today, I'm passing the torch over to my friend.
Yes, indeed. So why don't you, since it feels so bad to say, well, since she's your friend.
Since she's your friend. Dude, she doesn't like Mike. We talk about you all the time when we talk. Your name constantly comes up. No.
I was going to say, if that's the case, you and I are going to have a conversation afterwards.
No. Well, back for her second visit. Great friend of the show. Great friend of mine. Very, very special lady. And today we are going to let her run with it. So she's told me that she had some things that she wanted to bring up. And so we're going to let her kind of take the reins, and we're going to be the support for this phenomenal thing that's about to transpire here for the next 2 hours. So please welcome back to the show, Dr. Cathy Chapman.
Well, thank you very much. And I am delighted to be here, and I just laugh at the two of you. It's a lot of fun. Right now I'm laughing at myself because I clicked something on my computer and I have totally lost the visual of you two. So I'm going to have to talk without it. I don't know how to get back on.
So we can just make faces at you the entire time.
You can do that. You can do it at the entire time. I can't believe it. It's like, well, what does it look like? Okay, so we'll do this in whichever way. I might keep pushing buttons and see if anything just shows up, but it might not.
Cathy, I don't mean to say this in any sort of disrespectful way, but you're really showing your age.
I am really showing my age. I tell you, it's just all these little things that happen. And I keep thinking, well, if I hit this button, if I hit this button. So I don't want to take up time doing buttons, and I can talk forever. I just wanted to see these two handsome guys. You know, I don't get surrounded with that.
What show are you on? You must have like a screenshot of the Vampire Diaries or something like that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, it's just amazing how, you know, you get used to like the Zoom link or something. And it's like, no, where's that silly icon that tells me that I can do this and this and the other? I don't know. All right. But anyway, so let's get started with what I wanted to talk about: ghosts.
Plural. I like it.
Yep.
Don't you like that? And I was kind of laughing at the intro because I was going, oh, that's just what I want to talk about. But actually, I'm not going to just talk about ghosts. I'm going to talk about spirits in general that I work with and see. And sometimes I help release them. And sometimes they're befuddling. But I want to just say, well, let me tell you how I got started with this. How's that?
Yeah,
absolutely.
First of all, I've been able for many times when I got started with energy work of being able to sense people around. And I can get very intuitive information, things like that are happening. But one day I was sitting with a client, and she was a new client. And I was talking to her, but I was so distracted. I was listening to her story, and I finally said, I am so sorry, but I have to say this because I'm so distracted. Who is Susan? I keep hearing Susan, Susan, Susan. And after she kind of pulled her chin off of the floor, she says, Susan was my sister who had some severe disabilities. And I think she was even had some developmental disabilities, and she was younger than what she was, and she died. I said, well, Susan is here. And it kind of freaked me out also, because I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know that that was going to happen. And so we talked, and Susan just wanted to tell her that she's doing fine and that she loves everybody. And and my client said how that she missed her, and she knows that she's happier, and she was. And it was just a very short message. And I'm going to go more in depth to this, but I want to tell you another story with a client because it was really a lot of fun. This was a client that I knew. She'd been in several times. And again, she came in and she was talking, and she wasn't talking anything about what was happening that I was seeing. And I finally said, I have got to stop you because I am so distracted. There is a dog curled up at your feet. And she started crying. And she cried because, and any of us would cry, is she said, I ran over my dog the other day. Now that just broke my heart.
Yeah.
And I said, well, your dog is at your feet. And I described the dog kind of not a larger than small, but not about 50 pounds, probably about 20 or 30 pounds, and brown. And she said, that's exact, long haired. That was who her dog was. And I said, well, your dog's here. Your dog is happy. Your dog is not upset with you. Your dog feels very comfortable being here with you. And it just brought her a lot of peace, because as you can imagine, she felt so guilty. So then I started having other things that were happening. And one of those things was that I began to be able to sense when there were what I call darker spirits with people. And some people call them demons. And I finally came to what it was that I called them. And I see that I call them those who have forgotten who they are. Some people call them demons. And so I everything was created by the Creator, who is love. And these beings, and it's in the Christian scriptures, talks about how there was the good angels and the bad angels, and the bad angels were trying to take over heaven, and Archangel Michael came in and they threw him out of heaven. And they can never go back. I was told in, Catholic school, they can never go back to God because they had known who God was. Well, I've discovered that that's not exactly true. And it was fascinating because I now call them those who have forgotten who they are. They have forgotten that they are made of light and they may return to light. And that is so different than anything that I ever learned. And then I became aware of how we can, as people, throw our energy to someone else where we actually feel like we're actually there. That's kind of strange.
I do
so
it. Yeah.
You do it. And so people will find them. And by the way, guys, I finally found where y'all were. And so I can actually see you. So stop the faces.
Mike. I've just been agreeing with you, Cathy.
And so I've come up.
Well, I was just saying the only thing that I'm happy you did not see was my chuckle when you talked about
running over the dog.
Running over the dog. And that had nothing to do with the actual running over the dog. That's tragic. But the first thing that came to my mind is, who is your client? Christy Nome? Sorry. Go on. Sorry.
God, I mean, we're just going to ignore him, folks. Okay.
Yeah.
So I discovered that one of the things that was happening to people is that they would take on the energy sometimes of, let's say, a family member that had passed on and had not, I call it, completed this lifetime. And what I mean by not completed this lifetime is that they're still stuck in this incarnation, because you need to go back to God. You do your life review, you go through healing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And people may wonder, well, what do you mean, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Well, there's this whole thing that we don't even know, is that we're continually learning. We do not, I always call it going home, but we don't go home and then we don't sit around with little harps and little things on our head. We are very busy. And I keep trying to figure out, do we take naps? No, we don't need to sleep. We don't have to sleep. And so we have that entire time of being able to be with God, to be able to figure out. And when it's not just God, it's like, does Jesus meet you? Well, I've listened to a lot of near-death experiences, and it depends upon what's happening. But what I know is that when you have what's called a spirit attachment, it can affect you greatly. And the two basic spirit attachments I work with are those that have forgotten who they are, and tenacious little devils, to put it, pun intended. And then those who have lost their way. Now, let's start with those who have lost their way. Those are what people call ghosts. And they don't know, how did they lose their way? What do you mean? Well, there's several reasons why people don't go back to God immediately. One, which is really the simplest to take care of, it's people who don't know they're dead. They don't know their body is gone. And I've worked with some like that. And like a client would come in and they said, I'm having this and this, and boy, there's this. And I said, and I tune in and I get, oh, somebody die recently? Well, yeah, such and such happened. It was killed in an automobile accident. It was a friend of mine. I'm kind of paraphrasing things, putting things together. And I said, well, let me show you a way that we're going to do. Now, I always kept a little mirror with me after I learned how to do this. And I would hold the mirror in front of the person, and the being is there looking on, and I have them connect with the being themselves, the ghost themselves, and start talking to them. And suddenly you can they feel the awareness of it. People think I'm clairvoyant because I describe things so in such detail, but I'm not. I'm claircognizant, which means I have this knowing that comes in. And so I describe what they look like in some way, and then I hold up this little tiny mirror, And I go, do you see the face of whatever the person's name is? And they go, well, yeah. And I said, do you see your face? No. And I say, that is because your body is dead. Do you remember being in, for instance, an automobile accident? And they, well, yeah. So tell me what happened. I don't know what happened. I said, nobody will talk to me about it. I said, nobody will talk to you about it? He says, yeah, I keep asking questions and nobody will talk to me about it at all. And I say, well, they can't hear you because they can't see you. You're dead. Your body is dead. You're still alive. And sometimes they'll even go, I don't believe in that. I don't believe that there's anything after this. And so when we do some things to convince them, they just kind of disappear like that. Then another one that I worked with, I'm going to just give you stories just to give you an idea of it. And I had a friend who I knew in college, and I hadn't seen her in, maybe 30 years. And I heard she had been in an automobile accident. She had become a paraplegic because of it. And I went over to see her at the nursing home where she was at the time and asked her if I could do some healing work. I do body talk and other things like that. And so I was doing some healing work. And as I'm doing the healing work, which when I catch these things, I said, is your father passed on? And she said, yes. I said, he's here. And I never know how people are going to respond to that. And then I asked her, I said, did he do something that wasn't really very good? And she said, yes. I said, he wants to tell you he's sorry and he's terrified. And he was terrified of going to hell. And so when that kind of thing happens, as I tell people, my client load just increases. And so I start talking to him. And I first asked the client, I said, do you can you sense that your dad's here? And I'll give an idea of, well, he's on your right or he's on your left. And one of the things I'll do is, okay, so check over like whichever side they're on. I always give them the other side. So let's say the one that's on the left. And I'll say, I want you just to kind of focus on the area around your right shoulder, just, like between your head and your shoulder, and just notice that. And so they notice it. And then I say, okay, now go over to your left shoulder. Is there a difference? Think, yeah, it feels heavier on my left shoulder. And I said, okay, that is where your father or your mother or some other person is. And I want you to focus on them. And then they do. And I say, okay, I want you to ask, Dad, is that you? Or whatever name they call them. And yeah, yes, they get yes. And then they're able to tune in some way. Most of them can tune in. They get information. They feel things. And they will feel, some of them hear a yes, that's me. Some of them see light. Some of them feel a sensation. And she could actually, which says that she has some psychic ability, that she could feel him talking to her, and she was able to interpret the energy. And he apologized. She cried. And then I said, I would ask him if I can talk to him. And so he said yes. And I introduced myself. Actually, she introduced me to him. And I told him, I said, you need to understand, because he was Catholic. And I was a Catholic sister. For those who are new to this, I was a Catholic sister for 20 years. I said, there's some things that we were taught that are not true. And one of them is that everybody goes to hell if they've done things that are terrible. In fact, there really isn't any hell. We create our hell. And there are people who don't realize that. They're just terrified of what it is that's going to happen. I said, God loves you. You were created by God and God loves you, and you can go home again. And I can tell when the spirit starts to cry, and she was crying. My client, who was my friend, I said, she started crying. I said, all you have to do is reach behind you, and his mother was waiting for him, and just take her hand and go. I'm getting kind of teary. Take her hand and go. And he did. He took her hand and go and went. And when he left, it's kind of like he just sort of disappears. I don't feel his energy more. And I asked her, I said, did you feel him leave? And she said, yes. And I said, so how do you feel now? And she said, I feel so much lighter, because his energy, his heaviness, the emotions that he had, his guilt, his shame were hanging on to him. But because he's in her energy field, she had those feelings. It shows up in parents often will hang around their kids, especially if they're worried about them. So I had a client who said, I have had a stomach ache ever since my dad died. And I said, well, tell me about his death. And she said, well, he had intestinal cancer, colon cancer, and it was, there in his gut, and he died of that. And I said, did it start after? He said, yeah, ever since he died. I said, I think your dad's still here. He has not returned to God. He has not completed his life cycle. And so I did the same thing, had her connect with him, and he talked, and he said he was so worried about her because he knew how upset she was, and he wanted to be sure she was okay. She was in a not really good marriage. And so he was worried about her and her marriage and taking care of himself and herself. And she told him, she said, Dad, I'm okay, and introduced the two of us and said, I'm coming in and I'm getting counseling, and it's all going to work out. But I need you, if you really, really do want to help me, I need you to go back to God and finish doing whatever you're supposed to do over there. And after you have your healing, then you can come back as what we call a guide, someone there. Now, the reason you want the person to have healing is because if they don't receive the healing, then they're acting like they used to be. They may get all angry about it. They may be trying to control you. They may, any kind of thing like that. And so we want them to have received healing because they can let go of all of that stuff. So that's kind of a sense of ghosts. Now, here's another story, because I just think stories are a lot of fun. This is when I was still in a convent. And my friend and I were downstairs. We were in a duplex. And we had the convent. The sisters had both parts of the duplex. One was upstairs, one was downstairs. Well, we were downstairs, and there was no one else here. And we heard a chair move right above us. And we looked at each other, just kind of went, did you hear what I hear? Yes, I heard what you heard. And so we went upstairs, and there was nobody there. Well, I had read a book called Healing the Family Tree by Dr. Kenneth McCall, M-C McCall, A-L-L, and it was spelled like that, M-C-A-L-L. And I looked him up one time to see if maybe he was still alive. If he was, he'd be like 109. So I figured he had already passed on, but his book was still being published. And he was an Anglican. He was a psychiatrist. Religion was Anglican, but he was a psychiatrist. And he talked about how he went to China one time, and there was an obviously psychotic man literally chained to a wall and just psychotically just doing all this kind of stuff. And this little old lady, he says, this little old lady goes over to him, and he was terrified of what would happen to her. And she started praying. And then suddenly he was okay. And he said that was the wildest thing he'd ever seen. And he was able to find out what happened is that she prayed for his deliverance of the spirit that was attached to him, that was causing him to really be psychotic. And so he started investigating things. And reading his book, I went, okay, this makes perfect sense to me. And what he found is that people who were not mourned after they died were restless. They were not mourned. There was no funeral, which kind of has me wondered this. I do my ADD, tangents thing. Is what happens. So many people are choosing not to have funerals now. Have you noticed that? One nods yes, the other says no.
Yeah.
I really haven't been paying much attention to that. Nobody really in my orbit has died really since my father, and he actually hasn't been buried yet. Now that I think about it, but yeah, he would have chosen to. So I guess, yeah, I haven't noticed that. My apologies.
So it's just interesting to see what happens, because I think about that when he says not mourn. Does that mean that we need a ritual? Is it like a thing that happens to us where we need, and the person who died needs closure? I don't know the answer to that. But he found that people.
I think
say that again, David.
I said I think you're on it with that needing closure, because the couple of times that I've gone out and investigated poor farms where they just had a number on a little piece of wood, there wasn't even a name for the person, there was no respect given whatsoever. That those locations, those cemeteries are so active. The minute you walk onto those grounds, you are completely engulfed with ghosts. They're just all there wanting to ask you, questions, and why, I don't want to be here anymore. Why didn't I get, respect when I passed away, and stuff like that. And it's sad. It's overwhelmingly sad. I mean, when I walk out to places like that, I'm such an empath when I don't shut myself down. And when I go to places like that, I completely open myself up. And I'll just stand there and openly weep for a half hour.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just everybody's sadness is just bombarding the hell out of me. And then I have to pull myself back a little bit and close myself down a little bit.
And so when
except to talk to them. I mean, I don't know how to transition someone, but I try to give them comfort by having conversations with them and stuff.
It is so easy to help them transition. So next time you go, is you tell them that you can help them go. And they'll go, well, how can you do that? And you're maybe wondering, how do you do that? And says, well, who do you know has died in your family? Or did you have a grandmother? It depends upon how old, because I've worked with even little children. And when you know that, it says, let's call her. Let's call him. Let's call someone who loves. And that's just what I do, is I ask for one who knows this one, because they're usually hanging around them, trying to get their attention.
Okay.
Pay attention to what is happening. The person who's died doesn't really pay attention, because there are so many angels and guides that surround us until we make that decision to go home. And it's like you have to call their attention to it. And you can simply say, well, let's call somebody who knows you that's passed over. Let's call somebody. And then I will often get a sense of it. I say I see it, but I don't. But it's like, if you turn around to your left or you turn around to your right, I said, there's a light there. Do you see that light? I just know that it's there. And then I'll say, who is that's coming out towards you? And I'll hear, that's my mom. That's my Nana. That's my brother. That's my baby. Whoops, tears might start coming again. And then they turn and I say, take their hand and go. And they leave. And there's such a difference in the way the energy feels, because when I'm in it, I can feel their pain. You'll get ghosts that are so angry because nobody will talk to them.
Right.
You know, so like when you were talking to him, David, it's like they're able to say, well, at least you're paying attention to me.
Right.
And
And I
so
can feel that.
yes,
I
and
can
all
feel them
you have
pause.
to do, is just help them call someone.
Okay. I'll give it
Now,
a shot.
some of them are afraid. So what I do is if they have a particular religion or spiritual tradition, I call from somebody from that tradition and talk to lots of Christians, because lots of Christians come my way, having been immersed and still am in the Christian tradition, just differently than what I ever was before. And so Jesus will come. You know who comes for children? Mother Mary. She comes from children. And I'll be working on somebody and they're laying down on my massage table. It's not massage, and doing energy work on them. And suddenly it's like I can feel it. I can just feel it. And I say, have you lost, and this is a woman, have you lost a child? Or sometimes you have to ask, were you ever pregnant? Because you don't know whether it's a miscarriage or an abortion. And this woman, she was in her 90s. And she had a career as a model when she was younger. And she said, yes, I did. I had a miscarriage. And I said, well, your child is here. And I help her to communicate with that child. And then I'll say, it's time, you need to go home. It's like the child didn't want to leave at that time. So, that's 50 years. No, that was if she was in her 90s, 20, 70 years. And Mother Mary shows up, and they literally, when I say they, I'm talking about the child, the baby, they literally jump into her arms. And they go. And then the parent, the mother, feels such peace that she didn't even know she wasn't feeling in the peace. I've worked with women who have had abortions and helped them to meet their child. And I say, you talk to them in any way that you want. And you can say it out loud to yourself. It doesn't matter. I don't want to interfere with that. And usually the mother is saying, I am so sorry. I wish I could have given you life. Because I've had women say, it doesn't matter whether or not I do the same thing again, because it was just a horrible situation. But the mother then feels free, and the child goes home. It's really amazing of what happens with that. And I'll work with people where they don't even tell me someone is gone. Like my friend, it's like somebody is right there. They're there, and we do the same process. And those crosses you see on the side of the road where somebody's died there, sometimes that's where they died. And sometimes they're attached to the crosses, to the memorials. And I knew of a woman that I've worked with before, and just teaching her how to do some of these things. And she stops at crosses and she goes and talks to them and helps them go on. It's just a wild sort of thing. Now, I've gone to the Alamo. Okay, so Texas, Alamo, that's where I'm from, is Texas. And a friend of mine who does similar stuff that I do is that we went to the Alamo one time, and we saw there was this little village that was still doing their little village stuff all around where the Alamo is, right near the Riverwalk in San Antonio now. They don't even know there's this other world here. And we would talk to some of them, and it was some of the soldiers that were still there. And one of them, he was standing, young guy, like maybe 16. He was there next to the cannon, and he wouldn't move because General Travis said, you stay here. And we had to literally manufacture an etheric cannon for him that was an exact duplicate of where he was, and said, how about if we take you and the cannon to go? And he left. He was able to go home. Now, I went to Gettysburg one time, and there are lots of spirits over there. And they hid from me because they didn't want to leave. They hid from me. And so that was an amazing experience. And I said, you can go. Nope, they were going to stay there. So somebody else might be able to help them, or there may be something that needs to happen in the country or in the space. You may need more people to say it's okay. But, as long as the country is in such division as it is, that war is never over. Now, the latest one that I had was really cool. Last June, my sisters and I went to Oahu, to Hawaii, and my sister Anna and I, we went to the Arizona. And I was thinking, I'm going to see lots of things there. And so we went on to the Arizona, and I was just astounded because there were, I don't know the terminology, but there were a group of men in formation, flag, dress Navy outfits, kind of things for them. And I found out that they had they knew I was coming, and they kind of knew that I would be there. And they were waiting for me to come so that they could leave the ship. And the reason that they wanted me to see them is because, and this is what I found out, is the people that stay on the Arizona, the spirits that stay on the Arizona, are the people who still have family members that love them, know of them. It could be a grandfather, a great-grandfather. And they stay on the ship so that they can be there when their family comes to them. And when nobody remembers them anymore, they leave. Isn't that amazing? And I was looking at all the names written on there of who was there, and I was and finally saw Admiral. I don't even remember his name. And I asked if I could speak with him. I said, well, when are you going to go? And he says, I will go with the last group that leaves my ship. And every time that we go to a memorial like that, to send those who died there love, to just tell them that we're thankful, to tell them whatever it is that you need to tell them, we are comforting them. And when it's time, they will leave. But they're not going to leave until the last one stops visiting them. And that doesn't mean stop visiting them, because they are comfortable where they are. And what I get and I'm just getting the message right now, is they're kind of in an in-between space. They know who they are. They know where they are. They know they're going to go home, but they're still in service to our country, to the people here, to know that this is what happens with war, and there can be other ways to do things. So
I got a question for you.
I was just getting ready to ask.
Yep. So we have had this conversation, Mike and I have, numerous times, and we've kind of openly talked about it, not really debated about it, but I don't think we ever came to a clear conclusion. And you just said something that is the exact topic that we were talking about. So how does a spirit know that you're coming? Because I can't tell you how many times I would get visitations before I would go someplace, a day before, 2 days before, or when we get somewhere, the first thing that we'll hear is, hey, David. Like, how do they know that I'm coming?
I have no idea. I just know that there's quite a grapevine. That's just what I call it. There's quite a grapevine that it happens. It's like people come to know. And okay, I'm just getting information now, is that really what happens is there's no space, there's no time
Right.
where they are, and that their communication goes out like they give the example of radio waves or radar or something like that. It goes out that much. And so there'll be times when, like when I said all the people from at Gettysburg, they were hiding. They were behind trees. They were behind rocks. Some of them were under the ground. They didn't want to go. There's nothing I could have done for that.
Right.
There are other times where I'll go and do a house clearing. And there's spirits of the house clearing. It's like spirits from all over the neighborhood come. It's like they heard I was coming. They want help to leave. And I was at this one place. It was at a place of business. And I came over. And again, everybody in the neighborhood was there. And there was a little boy who was about 3. And he and his big sister, I think it was a big sister, were there. And called in Mother Mary, called in a family member that I found out they'd been in an automobile accident. They'd been killed in an automobile accident. Well, I had to tell when I do this with people is you take everything with you that you brought with you. And so this little boy had toys, and he kind of took all of his toys, and then he left, and then suddenly he comes running back in front of me, and he grabs, which I didn't realize was there, a frog, and brings it back. And so he took everything that he had with there. But people do know, they know when I'm coming to do a house clearing, and they just didn't know how to go back. And any spirit that's listening to me, listen, all you have to do is ask for somebody to help you. And somebody is right there. You just have to open your eyes and to go.
Okay. So I'm going to follow up on that. So then with the positive experiences that you have with situations like that and moving ghosts and spirits on, I'm going to assume that you also run into situations where darker spirits know that you're coming.
Yes.
And so how do you deal with that? I mean, like it's almost unfair, right? Because they're digging in, I would imagine, right? Like they know you're coming and they know the reason why you're coming. So they're digging in, right? As they're getting ready for this fight long before you show up. Because that's what happens to me. So if I'm going someplace that has a lot of negativity, I'll get a visitation dream, almost like a warning from the entity that's there in my dreams 24 to 48 hours prior to arriving on the site. And it'll be a blatant, like, you don't need to come. Everything's fine. Sometimes it's the mind games. And then sometimes it's an open threat.
You're right. I've never had that, David, but I have had, in fact, last night I got a text from a client and said, can you call me? It's an emergency. And she had been visited by spirits, and we were able to release 3 of them. But there's one that's dug into her that I said, I have to spend some time and really prayer and meditation with this to see how to let this one go, because it was dug in there. And there's 2 kinds, I call it the 2 kinds of spirits that kind of come together and are there. She had a lot of, some people call them disincarnate spirits, which I call those who have lost their way. And then she had those who have forgotten who they are. So she had one that's still in the really evil kind of thing. And I did everything that I knew how to do, and I still couldn't get this one to release. So I'm waiting to see what comes to me to let her go. I'm going to call her later on today. And sometimes it's beyond our abilities to be able to do that. It's like there's something else I don't know. If people who have read the Christian Gospels, the disciples of Jesus could do the same thing that he did pretty much, but they came back and said there was a spirit that wouldn't leave. What was the matter? And Jesus said, it takes a lot of prayer and fasting. So the way I interpret that, and from what has happened with me, is that my skills, if you want to call it skills, grew as I grew on a spiritual level. And so if you take a number line, let's say my vibration, I'm just making all this up because I have no way of knowing any of this. Let's say my vibration is a +5 on the number line. I can do a lot of healing work with people who are on a -5 on the number line and lower. Now, so wait, not lower, but a little bit. I always
So
get
like
mixed up.
zero to -5 is what you're saying.
0 to -5 is exactly what I'm saying. Thank you for that.
Yep.
But I may not have the skill level or the vibration needed or the amount of light in my system to work with people that are a -6 and way out of my league if we're getting to a -20 sort of thing. And so that's the only thing I can imagine that has happened with me last night is there are spirits there, but I usually call in like Michael the Archangel and stuff, and that spirit still didn't move. So I don't know what it is that's there. Could be something in her that's holding the spirit in there, and I need to find out what that is. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yep.
So let's go to those dark spirits that people will call demons. So what I have found with that is that you have, again, a number line. All of them, though, are below 0. All right. But you have some that are, I'm going to almost like babies kind of spirit, not real babies, but they're young at doing this. And they may be a -3, -4, and they may have heard or found out, hey, they could get out of here. But the thing that scares them so much is that the dark side is rather retributional. So let's say I find a dark spirit on somebody. And one of the techniques that I use is to tell them that you have been found, you have been discovered, and I know that because you have been discovered, you have failed, because they have to work under cloak of darkness, if you want to put it that way, so that somebody like me doesn't come in and release them and says, and then I know when you fail that you get punished. And you can feel the fear coming up. I know you will be punished. And I make an offering. What if I can arrange it to where you're never punished again? And so that starts the process with them. And what's interesting about it is that there are some times that from the dark side, they start coming over because they're going to come into this battle. And I usually before that do personal prayer or even say it out loud with them of getting a whole military brigade, if you want to call it that, of Archangel Michael's band to protect them and to protect me from that. And
so you're saying like the cavalry's arriving for the demons.
That's right, to protect from that. Now, any of those, as you called it, demons, any of them can make a choice to go back at any time. But remember, they have been all of this infinite time hearing that they can never return. And actually, I learned this from somebody else who learned this from somebody else who learned this from somebody else. And even in the Catholic Church does exorcisms. Many people don't realize that. They're real big believers in all of this stuff. But there's only one exorcist per diocese, and it's a priest. And I've read the prayer. Part of the prayer of the exorcism is to return them to hell. And I found you don't need to return them to hell. They just kind of come back again and cause problems. You can actually return them to God, because when we talk about God loving unconditionally, that means everyone, everything ever created, and God's love has never ended, even though they rejected God. So how come it's written that way? Well, it's written by human beings. I channel information in, but it can come through me, and I could be having a bad day, or I have something else going on, or a belief system, and I don't get the right information in. So you think about, 2,000 years ago was a long time. And you think about at that time, what did people believe in? Retribution. I mean, the whole thing about an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth can kind of sound pretty bad, but it actually was an advance in the ethics of punishment so that somebody isn't killed because they stole an apple. Now, of course, here we are in our country, and you hear it all over. They're going to steal my car. I'm going to shoot them dead. That's thrown things over in a spiritual realm that's not ethical, if you want to talk about it. It's not where we go. And so we have a lot of work. You get my spiritual view as we're coming in this. We have a lot of work to do in how to recognize that, yes, you lose a car, but life is very precious, no matter in what level it is. You can see how all of this kind of goes in together. And I know there are people out there that disagree with me, but that's life. And I've lost totally where I was.
You were talking about bringing the, well, you kind of paused when I said, they're bringing the cavalry, so that you're bringing Michael and the army of light to protect you and the
one that wants to go back.
The young demon that wants to basically is taking you up on your offer, I think is kind of.
That's right. And sometimes I'll say, all you have to do is look deep within yourself. And some of them, when they're being really stubborn, is that they don't want to look deep within themselves. So being a good therapist, I manipulate them. And what I say is, oh, you must be afraid if you don't want to look into yourself. You think any good demon is going to be afraid? And right. I can too. And they look within themselves, and I can feel the shift. And when I'm leading a client through this, when they're helping me, they can feel the shift. And I say, okay, so what do you see? And they say, light. I see light. And I said, yes, you were made from light, and you may return from the light. You've been lied to. And so then what I do is, I know, because I've done some of it, and I know there are a lot of people do it, there are those talking to the demon, the soon-to-be former demon. There are those who you knew in darkness that are now in the light. I would like to invite some to come talk to you. And they do. It's like they're ready. They're ready to say, come on, let's go. It's different. It's not what you think. And they come, and I can feel them. And it's like listening to, when you're at a party and there's somebody in the next room and they talk, but you can't really tell what they're saying. And then I'll say, well, are you ready to go? Says, yes, I can go. I said, all right, you can go. You must remove any structure you built within the person. You must take anything you left within them, because you can build energetic structures, and you can take that with them, and they will go. And the person feels such relief. I had a client ages ago. I only found out, because they don't always tell you what they experienced later. I hear much later, oh boy, after you did this with me, his psychosis went away, because it wasn't a biochemical thing within him. He had a spirit attachment to him. And this one was more of the dark side, the demonic side. And so that being able to remove those is a gift. It always dissolves me into tears. And I'll always tell the client, I said, do you know what you just did? If it's returning their father, I said, you just sent your dad to God, to where he could receive healing. You did this. I said, you just took a being who could come back and hurt someone else, and you sent them home to absolute love and joy. And they're free, and they will never come back and hurt you or anyone else ever again, because now they're on our side.
Right.
Now they're there working with us.
So here's the concern that I have for you personally, hearing this. you know, Lucifer doesn't like losing.
No, he doesn't.
And when you are crossing over these immature, low level kind of yearlings, so to speak, and bringing them back to God, you've got to be creating some incredibly powerful enemies on Lucifer's side. Like there's got to be some entities that are like really, really upset that you and others, not just you, but I'm speaking of you personally because we're talking about it right now. But there's got to be, you know, some entities that are just foaming at the, I can almost see it. You know, they're just like foaming at the mouth, waiting for you to slip up. So how do you deal with that?
I deal with it by, first of all, having as strong of a, whether you want to call it a prayer life or whatever, as possible, to use the energetic tools that I've been given to establish my heart source, to be given Michael's sword, Archangel Michael's sword, to work with the violet flame. And I call for reinforcements. And so far, I have had problems before, but nothing really major that has happened. Good. And one of the reasons we had the time change today was because I had the Sunday ceremony and I was waiting to be here, and y'all were wonderful enough to be able to change the time. But we have what I channeled one time was what's called the heart source, which is to be able to get you, it's an energetic structure that you can construct. Can I share that with y'all? With your folks?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the first thing, it's 7 steps. The first is to go deep within your heart, the heart chakra. And I tell people, I said, when I first learned to do this, first your heart chakra is in the right between your breasts in there. And okay, so for a joke, here's a joke. Women have to figure out which part, you know, if they're older. Well, you know, mine kind of.
So you're saying that the difference between an 18-year-old woman and a 78-year-old woman, that their heart chakra might be a few inches off.
Yeah, so we got to move it up. It's like, okay, terrible joke if y'all have to edit this out of your thing. So the joke is that this elderly woman called the emergency room and wanted to know where her heart was. And they said, right there, right in the center of your chest, just a little bit to the left. And so it's like just under your breast, but right there. And so about an hour later, she comes into the hospital because she shot herself in the knee. So, you know.
That's,
my God.
You know, hey, all of you other guys out, it's a joke.
I think we just created not dad jokes, but grandma jokes.
Grandma jokes. Oh, my paternal grandmother had some real jokes about that kind of thing. So, but anyway, then the heart source, you move your attention into the heart chakra, which is in the middle of your chest. And imagine yourself being little and walking into that space. It's a vortex of energy. And just go deep within. And I can feel people doing it. And now just you leave that there, but then it's like you come at yourself, your awareness goes around to the back because the heart chakra has a back. And then you go in there. And somebody's too low. There you go. And then go to the right. All right. And then just float right in there. And you keep going because the back of the heart chakra has this amazing place called your sacred space. And you can teach whole classes on that and what you can do in there. But it's a protected, very protected place. And so you go as deep as you can and then you stay there. And now you come out again and you go into your third eye, which is in the brow. So it's not right between your eyebrows. It's up just a little bit. And you go deep within that chakra. That's the third eye, the 6th chakra. Go as deep within as you can. Okay, and then again, you're keeping your awareness on these places. Now you go to the back and go into the back of the third eye. And now you connect the heart chakra with the third eye with a beam of energy. First time I did that, when Alma taught me how to do that, it was like an electrical charge that went throughout my entire body. And then you send the beam of energy straight up to the center of the universe, which is a place where God is, as well as inside of us, and then straight down into the center of the earth. And so you're, in essence, you're in the third dimension, down connected to the earth, and you're in the fifth dimension, connected above with spirit. And when you're in this space, there's a lot more to teach about that. But when you're in this space, you are in a place within your heart where you're protected, because it's a protective energy. Now you can ask it, please expand to the furthest reaches of my aura, or when I hold my fingertips out to there, whichever place is larger. And it is a strong protective space. You have to practice doing it until where you get to that point, you can simply say heart source and you're right in it. And what you want to do is to learn to be in it 24/7. You just need to be in that place. And I am in that space. And I call upon my spiritual resources, Archangel Michael, another archangel known as Lord Metatron, Yeshua. I call upon, which is the Aramaic name for Jesus, which is, I prefer to use that name. And I call them to surround me and to protect me. And it happens. It's amazing of what happens. And when you're in your heart source, you're also able to differentiate truth from untruth, or variations of truth. It's like, if you're watching the news, be in your heart source so you can find out whether or not they're just blathering on like idiots and don't know anything and just trying to, bring fear into you. And it doesn't matter who it is. I tell people, like, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, both sides do it.
Well, sure. We talk about this all the time. They're controlling the narrative.
They're controlling the narrative, and they want to increase fear, because then people are frozen.
They become more obedient.
They do. They don't want to. It's like when you're in fear. I read this research study that the brain literally shrinks, millimeters, but literally shrinks when you're in fear, which is interesting. So that's what I do. And I start off with prayer, whether it's if it's somebody who doesn't pray, then I do it silently. If it's somebody who does, we do it together. That book I was telling you about, Healing the Family Tree, this guy, he changed so much, this Anglican psychiatrist, that he started praying a lot, and he actually had Jesus start to come to him. And the guy said, well, he was talking about demons and things, and Jesus said, just say the prayer that I gave you. And the guy says, Dr. McCall, he says, Lord, I am so sorry. I don't remember the prayer. I don't remember you giving me that prayer to get rid of demons. And Jesus sighed. Okay. It goes like this. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And you go all the way to the end, but there was something that Jesus added at the end, because Jesus is right there with him. Instead of deliver us from evil, it is deliver us from the evil one. So I had learned that, and I was working with somebody who I knew, and she had a really evil guy attached to her, demon, kind of higher up on the thing. The more powerful you are or could be, the more vibrant the dark energy, because you have to have skill, because they don't want you to let your power out or to use your power. But she was also what they call a multiple personality. So the key is to find the demon part and to release that. And so we're having this discussion with this dude. And I said, well, you're going to have to leave. He said, I'm not going anywhere. That just reminded me, maybe that's what I need to use with this other young woman. And I said, okay, sure you will. And I asked her to say the Lord's Prayer with me. And I said, it's just at the end, though, I want you to say, deliver us from the evil one. And I'm laughing at myself for not doing this last night. And we get all the way through it, and he's being a jerk, naturally. And then it was, deliver us from the evil one. And he was gone like that.
Really?
Just like that. It was totally different. The energy changed. Everything changed just like that.
And he was what you would consider to be a higher level negative vibration type of polished leadership type of guy.
Yes. Because this woman was very powerful. In fact, now I don't know if she still is, but the last time that I saw her, she was in Houston on a radio station called Pacifica, where they talked about all kinds of things and social justice issues and stuff like that. And she is a Black woman who was really making inroads of being able to look at whatever happened in the Houston area to proclaim the truth with that. Well, the dark side doesn't want that to happen.
Right.
The dark side wants us all now to just hide and not do anything. We've got lots of opportunities to do similar work. And it doesn't matter if it's with the spirits, but within ourselves, so that we know the truth and quit sitting on our rear ends during the whole thing.
I don't want to go into like a conspiracy theory type of conversation per se, but do you think that there are dark ones that have infiltrated powerful people within our system that are kind of leading the masses in the wrong direction?
I do, but see, I'm kind of big on conspiracy theories. And who is
Mike doesn't want to talk about them usually.
Much about I think her name is Cheryl Atkinson. She's the journalist that got fired by ABC because ABC, allegedly that she was fired because she wouldn't lie about what was happening. She's now an independent journalist. I'll have to send you her name and find her website and stuff. And she was selling this mug and says, I need new conspiracy theories. All my others have come true. But when you think of things in a sense of a battle, is that you have the darkness on one side. Well, the darkness wants to win. And when it makes so much noise, what it's doing is it convinces you that it's impossible to win.
Mm-hmm.
And that there's nothing you can do. Love is just a namby-pamby snowflake, using that word, woke kind of thing. And the truth is that, yeah, if you want to believe that, but it's not, it's one of the most powerful things in the world. And you can gather a group of people. Is it Princeton that did those research studies where they have monitors in different places in the world, including Antarctica, and they can always tell when there's a group movement, a large movement that is praying for peace or putting out all that kind of good energy, because the monitors go off. It also goes off with negative stuff. I think it was Princeton that was doing that. And there are things that can happen. And you hear people talk about themselves when they're not in large groups of darkness, but it's something that there was this wonderful video. This is an example. There was this wonderful video. It was in a store. I think it was a jewelry store or something. And this guy goes in ready to, steal. And I don't know if I can't remember if he had a weapon or not, but he comes in, and this woman, she said, in the name of Jesus, you leave now in the power of the Holy Spirit. And that guy was so scared, he ran out. So, and it doesn't matter. And I'm not saying Christianity is the answer. It can happen from any spiritual tradition. And because I do Christian stuff and I do metaphysical stuff. So I can call in Archangel Metatron. I can call in all of those things. And part of it is that when I'm in my heart source, I don't feel the fear. It's like, don't let them know you're afraid. Don't be afraid. It's like, they'll say that about animals. Don't let them know you're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And there is that power struggle. Now, the being that I channel, Amma, is she had me look at the term spiritual warfare. I don't know if I said this last time. And in there, so go look it up. Look up where warfare came from. So war comes from a Germanic word meaning conflict. And fair comes from the archaic English word meaning journey. Spiritual warfare, a spiritual journey of conflict. She says you can't overcome darkness with a spiritual journey of conflict. You're just increasing it. It is spiritual journey of love. And so that is when call in the spiritual beings that are around and having to watch your own stuff. I always tell people, if you start getting anxious, go back into your heart source. You're out of your heart source. You start getting angry, go back into your heart source. It's everything. If you're not there and standing there in your truth and able to say things in your truth, if you can't stand in a line at the grocery store or somewhere else and somebody's being a jerk because somebody's real slow. You could have somebody who has like Down syndrome that's sacking groceries or something and somebody making fun of them. If you can't step in there and say, stop, then you're not in your heart source. And so it takes those little things for us to realize the power that we have. We can stop people from being unkind, basically, in those little ways that can make a huge difference in the world. And the more that we do that, and I do that more often than not, is that, and I haven't run across that kind of situation, but with myself, you become stronger within yourself. When you speak your truth, you become stronger within yourself. When you tell someone that, no, I am not going to do that, and whether they call you whatever name they want to call you, and just say, that's just not how I am, is that I will give to people in ways that I can, and being in your heart source, you can kind of figure out, well, do I give a couple of bucks to this guy on the corner? Well, maybe not. Maybe that's not the best use of my money, but it might be to give this guy the use of my money. So I use it in those ways. And here in town, I'm just outside of Sedona and in a little town called Cottonwood, which is about as big as Sedona. But there are these signs that say you don't have to give money to panhandlers, and it's better to give it to people who work with the homeless and stuff like that. Well, I have a friend of mine, every month, she gets $100 worth of fives. And she hands them out as she feels led to hand them out. And somebody said, you really ought to give that money to the homeless coalition. And she said, no, I give my money to people who may not ever go to the homeless coalition. And she was standing in her truth with that. And there's somebody else who believes, no, just give to the homeless coalition. That's your truth. Stand in that truth. And whenever we stand in our truth, and the energy of it is within our truth, is that you get stronger. And then the energy of the goodness that you do, whichever that choice is, the goodness that you do and the vibration you have of that love, it increases exponentially, maybe not exponentially, maybe geometrically. And so you can get a group of people together. And some research study said if we had even less than 1% of the people up on this planet that would stay in their heart the entire time, it would change the world. I don't know how valid that is. I can just tell you they've done some research studies on what happens with the energy when there's just this group. I mean, I know it was was it a year ago where we hit 8 billion? Well, we hit 8 billion. I mean, we're going to hit 9 billion faster than that ever was hit before. But how many of those people, if we were able to stay in our heart, to tell someone that is angry because the guy with Down syndromes can't, fill your sack soon enough, and do it though with firmness and without calling them names, but just do it with firmness. I remember my mother one time, I was a little kid. Well, I'm little now, but I'm just under 5'2". And she said to this guy that was a sacker, and he was being really ugly to the guy who was another sacker who had Down syndrome. And my mother looked at him and said, "What you're doing says more about you than about him." And the guy shut up. And so we can find ways to do that. People that will ignore, or, people that are going by. Here's a woman trying to get through a door that doesn't have the automatic door thing. And she's got groceries in one hand and she's got a kid in a stroller in another hand, and, that kind of thing. And some people don't hold the door open, and you can hold the door open and change a life. And people think, well, that's kind of simplistic. Is it really simplistic?
Mm-mm.
It's not.
No, it's not, because it takes effort.
It takes effort. And also, you don't know how you change that person's life.
That's right.
And
it's paying forward a lot of times, because if people witness that act, they might become more likely the next time they're in that position to help and to do something positive. I believe that 100%. And Mike knows 100% and me are far apart. So, but I think that that's the honest truth. I think that showing love and compassion for another human being in a public setting causes other people to stop and think about it. And it might take them then on the path that you're on, where the next time they have the opportunity to help somebody or to tell the person who's being verbally abusive that, that's enough, that they might just take that, whereas they might not have done it before. They might now try it.
And in addition to that, you actually do something that affects two different people, because it may take that mother who breathes a sigh of relief with hope. Whereas if she still kept battling, she may be so frustrated and she might hit her kid. Mm-hmm. And could change that kid's life, which can change another generation. And we have to realize those things. And when you go back to, we're going to go back to ghosts right now, is that when you go back to how do we handle things in our life? Well, when I act in a way, and this has happened to me, and I act in a way which I said, well, wait a minute, this is not me. What's going on? And I actually find, like you were concerned, David, about it being, I find somebody in me. I gave a retreat for alcoholics one time. I was in the convent, gave a retreat for alcoholics, and I was leaving, and they were in Louisiana. I was living in Houston. I was driving back home, and I went, what is going on? I have all this stuff going on. And I heard, it's like one of my angels said, look in your heart. And I looked in my heart, and there was a low vibration spirit in my heart. And as soon as I saw it, it just kind of cackled and left.
So kind of let it know that it snuck in, type of thing.
It snuck. That's all it wanted to do.
Right. Just to show you that you're vulnerable.
That's right. I'm not as powerful as I think I am. That kind of thing. Yeah. It cackled and left. So sometimes I'll start looking for, okay, wait a minute, something's going on. Who is this? What is this that happens? And I know of people who are very aware of this, and they will say, you must leave. One of the favorite things I teach clients, and those of you who are listening to this, just try this. Just say out loud, this is my space. Above me, below me, all around me. Any energy that is here that is not mine, go home. And people who are sensitive, did you feel something leave, David?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel anything, Michael?
No.
I felt something leaving, and
Yeah.
I paid attention to where that something was. It was from my back. So you can get spirits and stuff attached, or ghosts, other people attached to you, because they go in from to the back where you're not looking, right?
That's
And
interesting
realize
because I didn't feel mine leave. I felt yours leave.
you felt mine leave.
I felt yours leave. Yeah.
And I'm getting a message from one of my angels that, yes, this was allowed to happen so I could get that experience, but it also came from last night.
Well, I'm sure. Yeah.
When I was working with this client. I'm not at my best after 4 p.m. It's like I am tired.
It's usually your bedtime, right?
That 8 o'clock is usually when I start getting to bed, reading and stuff like that.
4
But it's just
o'clock
like my
dinner
energy
time
is
for the
gone.
blue plate specials.
Yeah. So my energy is gone, and we all have to become aware of when that is and what to do.
I've said that for years. Never get yourself into a situation as a paranormal investigator if you're trying to help somebody else, if you don't have your shit together 100%, because you are doing them absolutely no good by walking in there at 75 or 82%
exactly
energy level. You have to go in there at 100% confident and ready, because you never know what you're going to find when you walk through those doors.
I was in Houston. I was working with a paranormal investigative team, and we went to this one house. They had gotten a call, and I was tuning in. I was the one who tuned in, without the machines, right?
Yeah.
Tuned in, and I had something happen that had never happened before. Is I had a spirit jump in me without me asking for that spirit to come. It was just a really freaky experience for me. I've never had that before. I've only had beings come that I invite, and it's just their energies that come in. But we were at this place where the woman said, I don't know what happens. There's all this crazy stuff that happens. There's bad stuff that happens. And so you'll love this story. Who came in was a Native American woman who lived in that area in the 18th century. And the woman there was now houses everywhere, is the woman whose house it was. She had some structure over her infant son's grave. And the woman came in and she used my voice and was so angry. And so I said, is there a way that we can do this? And so what was decided, and it's a long kind of series in there, is she said, I want my son honored. I want him remembered. And the woman whose house it was, she said, may I build a place in my garden for him to honor him? And she said, yes. And then she left me. And what I heard later was that she did, because she loved gardens anyway, and she just made a little thing and a little memorial for him, and she never had any trouble after that.
Sometimes it's that easy.
Sometimes it's that easy.
Yeah.
I've discovered that one of the reasons I worked in substance abuse for a while that runs rampant in my family. My youngest brother died of it 20 years ago. And the brother who's dying now he's 51 weeks younger than me, and he's not dying because of the alcoholism, but he has cancer, but he has been an alcoholic since he was probably 15. And one of the things I learned is that it is so hard for addicts of any kind to get better, because the people that die who don't go on because they're so stuck in their addiction, they get into the aura of the one who is using, whether it's the alcoholic or the coke addict or meth, whatever, because it's the only way that they can experience and feel the high. And I found that when I would start doing some spirit release work, people would get better. And I mentioned this to somebody that I knew, and she and her husband used to work in that. And I mentioned about this idea, and she said, that's what we would do. And they would be able to get better. I could tell when my youngest brother, he lived with me for a little while, and I could tell when he was using again, because he had all these spirits around him. And it was.
So they were riding the high with him, basically?
Yes, basically.
Wow. I never heard that before. That's very interesting.
Yeah. So those are, when we talk about ghosts, people that die that are addicted in their death, like people who died of overdoses and stuff like that. Even if it was an unintentional overdose, they're probably still stuck wherever they are, and they look for ways to get that high. Ghosts aren't much different than we are. You have nice ones, kind of things, and you have others that are just horror stories. I had two teenage girls that came in to see me. I got this email about, hey, is it possible that you do this and this? And I could tell it was a kid. And I said, yes. How old are you? Said she was 15. I said, I can't work with you without your parents' permission. And I did tell her some of what I do, because I don't put it that much on my website. Somebody might be able to find it. And it can bring the crazies out too. So that's part of what happens. So this woman came in and I had written permission from the one teen's mother, but she was working. She was a single parent. She was driving a school bus. She couldn't miss work. So the other woman, who was a writer and could set her own schedule, she came in. And as I was working with them, what I found out was that these two kids did something that a lot of kids do, is they play with a Ouija board. And this guy came in to them, and I never could send him back, but I got him away from them. He was a rapist, and he had died. And I was able to get him separated from them, but I wasn't able to get him to go to the light. Hopefully, maybe he's gone to the light by then. But people don't know what they're going to get into with Ouija boards.
You're preaching to the choir.
Yeah. So you've seen things like that.
Yeah.
Well, they had been in and out of psychiatric hospitals on every kind of antipsychotic that was around. And when I was able to get this guy away from them, even though I couldn't get him to go to the light, I was able to get him away from them. I had called in Archangel Michael and stuff, and they actually drug him away, because the girls said they were willing to do it. They wanted to be free. And it was interesting. It was about 6 weeks later, I got a call from a woman who was a therapist. It turns out she was the therapist to one of the other kids when she was an inpatient, and said, I figured if you could help her, you could help me. Well, hers was ordinary stuff, and it was harder to help with that, believe it or not, than to work with the spirits. But all that kind of stuff happens. People have no idea of, when you have the spiritual world, that some of the things that you are working with and that you're struggling with is a spirit of anger, is the spirit of addiction, is the spirit of whatever. It's like it comes within. And some of these spirits, I had a client that used to call them the family demon. When you have something that seems to go through families, that sort of thing happens. I was telling you about the Healing the Family Tree book. Well, in my dad's side of the family, there is how about if I say tons? It goes right through the family tree on my dad's of alcoholism, diabetes, and mental illness. And so I was doing the healing the family tree stuff. I was taking what the book said, and I was working at that time. I was in the what's called the charismatic renewal. People may hear about the praying in tongues and stuff like that. So I was involved with that on the Catholic level, and I had gone to a retreat about this and discovered, and the guy, he wasn't a priest, but he and I started having the same images of he said, your family is from Canada, isn't it? I said, no, my family's from, I was going to say France. And out of my mouth, unbidden, came French Canadian. And I found out that my family had immigrated from, back in the 17th century, immigrated from France to Nova Scotia, what is now Nova Scotia. And my grandmother tells me there's actually a statue to one of my ancestors who was the first farmer in Nova Scotia. I don't know if it's still there or not. So, and they ended up, so when people got upset with the French people, half of them went to Montreal, Quebec, you know, that sort of thing. And the other half came down to Louisiana in the Acadian migration. So one of my ancestors, evidently, and he and I were both seeing it. He was a trapper, and he was out making his rounds at night and checking things out. And he came across a small campfire that had a Native American woman and her infant son. And he raped her and killed the baby. And Dad came back and cursed the family. And so I keep watching to see what would happen. We had a number of masses and things like that to bring healing of the family tree. And so far, none of my nieces and nephews have the disease. One of them's kind of been toying with it, but another aunt had a little discussion with him and said, you do not want to be your father. He's the son of the brother that's dying. Says, you do not want to be your father. And they've listened. He and his wife have listened because, they're young. They go out and do that. And I keep thinking, okay, God, let's keep this. Let's break that curse that's there that affects the DNA. And when we had a mass at my sister's house, and I saw, as much as I could see in those things, is there was a huge line of, it looked like trappers, people that were of that time, and a huge line of Native Americans, and they both went to the light. It's like it broke that. And there was a difference in the family. Wasn't totally healed, but there's a difference in it. So there's all of these kinds of things that happen. And so curses is a whole nother topic that can
That's a whole other show. Yeah.
Yeah, that can affect you. But these ghosts, these demons, whatever it is you want to call them, one of the things is not to be afraid. So the movie The Sixth Sense,
yeah,
it's right on. It really is right on, without the spiritual dimension of the light. It's right on. And that's one of the things you do, is you've done, David, is talk to them. And it's like making friends with them. And that's how that young boy was able to overcome what had happened with him, and to learn that you can talk, you can say, okay, what happened? Sometimes they'll scare the kajibers out of you. Because some of them, that's just what they do. They're not too happy, and they're really not happy that nobody will listen to them. And just to have somebody listen to them brings them peace. And to have somebody who can help them discover that they can go home does all kinds of changing.
We have this beautiful, beautiful little cemetery in the area that I've been going to. I don't know. I've probably been there now a couple hundred times, but it's it's almost like a second family greets me when I walk in there now, when I walk on the grounds, you know. Like but Mike and I were there many years together ago, and we had this amazing conversation with this B-17 bomber pilot. It lasted for like 15 minutes, 10 minutes. I mean, it was forever. And it's just an absolutely amazing place. And the spirits that are there, they're all positive. I mean, there's nothing bad there at all. It's all just, they're just there because they're just, well, number one, it's a beautiful setting. Number two, I think they're just there checking on, you know, their grave.
Yeah.
But, you know, just popping in to say hi type of thing. Or like we talked about earlier, the grapevine lights up because I openly say, hey, I'm going to head over to so-and-so tonight. And, you know, that goes out on the radar. And then some of the entities that are there that like to talk to me know I'm coming. So they make it a point to be there. Maybe that happens. I don't know.
You know, my belief is that those ghosts, I'm just going to use the term ghosts, their lives are as complex as ours are. We think it would be this simple. It's like I thought it would be really simple to go ahead and get the soldiers, the seamen from the Arizona to leave. And what I found out was a whole new thing.
Yeah.
And which has tremendous depth to it. And I loved it when the Admiral said, I will go with the last team, with the last group that goes home. But they all know, they know they're dead. They know all of this other stuff. And they know that they are there for those who love them, even if they didn't know who they were. Grandpa who did this, or great grandpa who did this. And it's like, wow, get kind of arrogant. I do. You know, it's like, oh, well, I know this and this. No, I don't know any of that at all. It turns out there's just so much more that is there.
Mike, you've been quiet for the whole show, man. You write anything down? Any questions or?
I've got 14, something like that.
Well, we've got 21 minutes left, so pick the best ones.
Well, I mean, this goes all the way back, and some of them aren't necessarily for Cathy. I mean, I've pretty much just been listening and trying not to pull whatever hair I have left out from your dog barking in the background.
Oh, I'm sorry that you can hear my dog barking in the background.
Oh yeah.
What is he? He's blind and he's mentally challenged, and I don't know.
It's exactly right. He's a little Maltipoo. He's a rescue. I've had him for about not quite 18 months. He has dementia and he is blind, and I'm his person.
Yep. He needs mama.
I did notice that when Dave talked, he would be quiet. But when you would talk, he would start to go out. So
isn't that funny?
He can hear my voice. I guess
he can hear. I figured it was because he could hear your voice. I'm not going to go back over this because, like I said, it's the entire show. But I do have. My question is, because you said you wanted to talk about ghosts today, and then you said, you know, let's go to where, you know, where this all started, and we haven't stopped there. But why did you want to talk about that today? Like, has anything happened besides what happened last night, obviously? But I mean, has something gone down recently that made you want to come on and talk about ghosts specifically?
Yes, I had a number of people that felt like that they were, some of them, they felt like that there was somebody else there and they wanted me to release them. But I have several friends who wanted me to get in touch with their husbands.
To see if they were going to testify against them or what?
Just to talk to them because they miss them so much. And so, you know, that kind of thing that happens in that. So it was sending some people home, and some of them had been generational, like it was a great grandfather that nobody knew. By the way, I do change some of the details to protect the innocent kind of thing. But so it had been happening several times for this last week. And not actually this past month, there's been a lot of that happening. So that's why it was, because it was just popping in. And then last night was just one of those little things.
Do you ever get husbands that want to talk to their wives?
Yeah, I've had that before too.
You hesitated a really long time. Like
I
how,
did, didn't I? I have more women. Well, first of all, know that more husbands die before their wives than wives die before their husbands. So that's one thing.
Yep.
But the guys don't seem to be all that interested in it. You know, that's most of them. It's just too far out. The women, they know about it. And my sister lost her husband during COVID. And my sister is now, she now works with a priest to help release spirits that come to him. They come to him. The priest is in, those spirits come in his dreams, asking for help and crossing over. He actually has a podcast also. And that's what he does, is he goes with that. So my sister is now doing that, which just is amazing to me, because she would have never been able to do that if he was still alive, because he loved me, but he really thought I was weird. And that kind of thing freaked him out. And so when the way that Nathan does it is so different, and I talk about it, we both do the same thing, yet how it presents to him is so different. And they come in his dreams. Actually, he sees their death. He sees what happened in their death. And say that they want, talk about waking you up from a nightmare. Mine's much easier with that. So I'm seeing it more often. I have a client who is, I say she's more than a client, because she has learned so much from the work. It's been years, the work that we do. And she has started having spirits come to her, asking them to help them go home, to find their way home. And so she'll talk about that a little bit. She's in her 80s when she started doing that, and they would just show up, and she's set limits on it. She's had to tell them no when there would be a whole room full that come in. And it takes a lot of energy to do it, because you have to stay focused. And she had the unfortunate experience, because cats can see some of these things, and a cat that was very precious to her she thinks that they must have seen a spirit that came in and ran out of the house in the winter in New Jersey. And finally came back after a couple of weeks, but was very afraid and ended up dying from that. And that was a tremendous loss for her. And to find out that that would happen and how it would affect this animal that she loves so much. So there's all these things that can happen. There's a book, gosh, I was probably in my 30s, so that's 40 years ago, written by Malachi Martin, and it's on exorcisms. And he, of course, I think that's his name, and I can't remember the name of the book, but let's just say that he picks out the more horrific exorcisms that have happened and what the great destruction that can be caused. Like many people don't know, okay, what's it called? The woman that, I should know the movie, the name of the woman whose the head went around, you know.
The Exorcist.
It's called The Exorcist. Okay.
Yeah.
Most people don't know that's a true story.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very much so. Hold on. And I think she got into it with a Ouija board. I'm not sure, but I think that's probably where that started. But some of these things can be so violent. And then what happens is that people believe that you have to cause all kind of destruction to release them, and they can kill the, I'm going to call them the host, the person that's there, or the kid doesn't have it, or the person doesn't have a spirit attached to them. It's something else. They may be mentally ill or something. Ask another question. Question before the dog barks.
I'm going to ask this question because I know that it is a I don't want to say it's a sore topic with Dave, but he's very dead set on this thought process. And
I know where we're headed.
Well, I'm waiting.
I know exactly where we're headed.
And because this is going to be very amusing to me, to see your answer and Dave's reaction to it. But Dave is under the impression that there is absolutely no such thing as a child spirit. Correct. And you've mentioned him a few times during the show. So I would like to just sit back and watch you tear Dave a new one.
Well, I did, especially when I was in the convent, I did work with women who had abortions. And there's a book called Healing the Greatest Hurt by Matthew and Dennis Lynn and Sheila Fabricant. And I read that when I was in the convent. I've been out of the convent for 25 years now. And I used their process to help women heal from abortions when they came to me for that. And I would help them get in touch with the child that they aborted. I mentioned that earlier. And I managed to convince the pastor of the church I was the parish counselor for that we needed to have a mass for the unborn in which and invited women who had abortions or miscarriages or neonatal deaths to come in for healing. And in the whole process, it's like Father does his thing with the mass, and in between, where people would usually have a homily, I did a guided imagery prayer service type thing where I took them through this experiential thing. And there was, the church wasn't crowded, but there were probably about 40 or 50 people there. And I had them get in touch with the child and to carry on the conversation. It's just what I do in an individual session. Talk to them. You can say that you're sorry. You can get any other information, and to name them, because many of these children didn't have a name. And so they were waiting to get named. And so they brought up to the altar at what we call the offertory. They brought up to the altar the names of their child and put them in a bowl that was there for them so that we could bring the child in. And it was a mass that was of tremendous healing. But what was interesting, I'm going to talk about it from an individual session, because that's where I can give you this, is the child appears as a baby, and that sometimes by the end of the session, they become an adult. So it's like the spirit grows into itself, but the mothers expect to get an infant. And that this one person I worked with that was an infant, but by the end of the session, which was only like maybe a half an hour, they were about the age they would have been now. So I think some of that happens with the expectation of the person. And if a child is locked into, like some of them actually had gone back to God. So I worked with a woman who had 2 miscarriages and 3 abortions. And one that was a miscarriage, but was intended to be a miscarriage. The woman she was 13. And she ran and ran and ran and ran and ran and ran and ran. And she'll tell you that she agreed to the sex, but she was 12 with a 25-year-old. That's called rape. And she did everything.
Disgusting is what it is.
Yeah, it is. And she did everything she could, hoping that she could miscarry. And she actually did end up miscarrying. Don't know if it was because of that, but she there's a whole story behind that of how you can actually talk to the child, and some women end up miscarrying and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, but it is not a good time for you to come." And there are actually cases where people miscarry soon after that. And when we did the process to bring that child back so she could talk to that child was about 35 years old, which is what she would have been at that time. Did not come back as a child, whereas the others came back as infants.
So what is your take then on people who, I mean, not so much children who were never, born, into a physical body, but people who think they see 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, some, full-bodied apparitions, or they think that, a 5-year-old girl who maybe, died of a disease back in the 1800s or whatever is still in their house. Like, I think that's where Dave's
Right.
issue.
The baby thing for you, because I could see you getting frustrated as hell, Mike, in the fact that she wasn't touching on the right age range. Because I never said anything about abortions or miscarriages. That has nothing to do with it. I was told by my guides from a couple of different cases that when I get visited, when my clients were seeing young kids in the house, and that young kid would come and see me 2 nights before I was going to be there, and she would threaten me, that is an evil entity representing itself as a child. That is not a 2, 3, 4-year-old child. That is a dark entity who is using manipulation to try and work on the sympathy of the people at the house. It happened to one of our good friends, Brian, and changed his life forever. He took that damn kid, and I told him, there is no little girl in the bathroom talking to you. Oh, yeah, there is. She's right there. What do you mean you can't see her? No. And he takes that damn thing home and attacks his wife, and his wife attacks his son. So I've never, ever had a case, ever. All right. I have one case. One out of hundreds that I think when we were at Farrar long time ago, that schoolhouse in Iowa, I said to the kids that if you want to hang out with me tonight, that I will surround you and protect you with my light, and we can freely walk through the school together for the whole entire time that I'm here. And on my recorder, I got about 10 little sets of footsteps running at me, and you could hear them distinctly. Mm-hmm. Little shoes running at me, just from all around me. That's the only time that there's ever been a kid that I would say that maybe there were some children there. Other than that, I have never, it's always been a negative entity. Always. I've never seen a child that needed help. And so that's what Mike's leaning into.
Well, I'm not even leaning into that. I agree with you. If a little like 6-year-old girl in a dress comes, and shows up and be like, you come to this house and I'm going to slit your throat. Probably not a 6-year-old girl.
Right.
But your thing is, and I get it, is that, God would never allow an innocent child to remain on this plane. That is your.
That's what I've said 1,000 times.
I
don't believe God would leave a child, an innocent child, that God would leave an innocent child behind.
Right.
That's exactly what I say.
That is what I want Cathy to.
Okay. That's Cathy addressed that.
To address.
Okay. I don't know the ins and outs. I can only tell you my experiences. Okay. But I have, I remember one time doing a house clearing, and this was not a new house. And there was a 7-year-old, maybe 8, 9-year-old girl that was hiding in a closet. And it had been a child that had been abused, and she was terrified, not just abused, but murdered. And was terrified. The spirit was terrified to leave, and we got her back out. and just she went right back in. So I think that there's things are more complicated than they seem. You'll have to ask your guides about that, David. But I first of all know that the children are never left alone. Everyone has their guardians, their guides that are there with them.
Right.
They're always there. So I worked with, well, I mentioned about the little boy that was there and he came back and got his frog.
Right. Right.
So, sort of thing. But I haven't had the experience of demonic childlike spirits. I haven't had that.
Well, you don't want it. So
No, I don't. Absolutely do not want it.
no, you don't. Trust me. Nope.
And I'm just saying
There ain't
right
nothing
now,
good about it,
anybody
so.
who thinks that they're going to do that, that's not going to work. Just
Yeah.
don't.
No.
Yeah. So can't tear him a new one. And I can't affirm any other thing, but just tell you what I've experienced with that.
That's all right. I'll get it out of somebody.
He's
Okay.
he's on a mission. He's like the Blues Brothers, man. He's got like a half a tank of gas, a pack of cigarettes, and and he's just on this mission to find somebody to just rip me apart on that theory. And I don't think you're going to find anybody.
What's interesting, I have a friend of mine, she just passed on Christmas Day, actually. And she would always say, I leave things within the realm of possibility. And
Fair
so
enough.
I think that there can be both and that happens with that. There's just so much that we don't know and that happens within the spiritual world. And, I'm going to defend myself really well spiritually and call all of my guardians and everything to be with me now that, we've had some talking about being attacked on a spiritual level and stuff like that. So
Right.
I'm going to put my armor on, David.
I think you should. I think you should. I mean, they only stick around for me. I can tell that they're around, but they don't. My wings are wide. I don't let anything in.
Yeah.
If you can envision it, I can send you a mental projection of what it looks like around me. It looks like it's like I'm inside of a snow globe. So I've got these little tiny white crystalline flakes coming from God, these little white light flakes coming from God directly that constantly rain around me that nothing can penetrate.
I like that. I might borrow that.
Help yourself.
Okay.
And I can see myself with wings. I don't know why, but I can literally unfold my wings and I can encompass a circle of people. And I've done it many times. I can encompass a group of people and keep them completely safe, whether they want to be or not, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I can envelop them, keep them safe. And then when I know the threat's gone or, whatever it was is past, I just fold my wings back in.
I like that.
And I can actually see it happening visually. Mike thinks
yeah, I usually feel and experience things like that happen. My youngest brother, the one that was an alcoholic, and he also, you can't be an active alcoholic and have diabetes and live very long.
No.
And that's what killed him. He shows up every time I'm working with an addict or a musician, because he was a musician. And he works up he shows up every time that happens. And I've had some spirits that come in. I just tell them to get lost in. But I have that whole team that works with me. You have your team that works with you. And so it's amazing how it all happens.
Yeah. Does your brother come back like to help that person transition? Or does he just come back to mess with you or to say hi to you? Or
no, he just comes back. This is what I'm seeing live people that are alive. He just comes to offer his 2 cents and send his love. And whenever I go into guilt about something about him, because he did live with me for a while and I got real angry about something when he walked off and took everything, his energy and everything out of the house and didn't tell me. I could feel it was gone. And I was so angry when he called back one to live with him. I said, he wasn't going to treat me that way. So no. And that's really the last time I had talked to him. And then he died later. And he keeps telling me, let that go. It's just as it is. I
Right.
love you. It's okay. Just let it go. But sometimes when it's our family members, we find reasons to feel guilty.
Yeah.
Well, on that high note, we are out of time. but for anybody, Cathy, who wants to, reach out to you or has a question of their own, how would they do that?
They could email me at Cathy with a C, Cathy Chapman, PhD at gmail.com. And it's just CathyChapman, PhD at gmail.com. Or interestingly enough, my website is odysseytowholeness.com.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I
love that.
laughed about when Dave first sent it to me. It just means that you're meant to be here.
Yeah.
Right.
I feel real good with you guys.
Well, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
I hope you got what you wanted out of it.
Spread the word.
Absolutely.
Spread the word.
All righty. Well, Dave and I will be on again next week with our 8th year anniversary show.
Wow.
No idea what the hell that's going to be, but
it's in the works.
It's
going to be a surprise. Even
to,
for us.
To all of us, including Dave and myself.
Yep, I can see it already.
But until then, stay healthy, stay safe. We want to see you back here. Everyone, have a great rest of the weekend.